Alrighty, folks, welcome back to another episode of Live in 5, baby. Azo, Jay Swish, bringing it to you raw, bringing it to you uncut over here. It is the 78th edition of Live in 5, and on the program today, Azo, we had Harvey Martin, who is a mental skills, breath performance, human resource coach. I don't know the exact title you would put on Harvey, but he's been working with the San Francisco Giants for the past 4 years, I believe. And he's finally stepping away. He's one of those guys, Azo, when people kindly, I think, come accustomed to him, is he's hard to put in a box. So as much as he wanted to make it to the majors, and, he wasn't able to make it there as a player, as a coach he was, and he got to fulfill his dream in a sense of being in the big leagues. In that breath, he's one of those guys you can't put him in a box. He's not going to be somewhere for too long. He's a modern day philosopher. He's got so many different ideas and thoughts in his head. So I think him jumping back into freelance coaching and going back to, something I worked with him in terms of, it was called Mind Strong, something similar to that, where he's working with athletes, high level athletes, obviously still working with guys in the MLB and throughout all sport. I think that'll be good for him, and who knows, he might hop back into the MLB for the right price. But definitely an interesting cat, man. He always has been.
Oh yeah, just an interesting dude. He's got a really cool outlook on life, Jordo. Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation with him. It was great. Honestly.
Yeah, he's got just a different way of connecting with guys, especially in sport. Now, he is a guy that played college baseball. I played at Mankato for a year, actually, and then at Central Michigan. It was actually a really good pitcher, spent time in single A, double A, and then just, couldn't really hack it in terms of, maybe making it a career. So he kind of transferred into what he's doing now. And yeah, man, like, I don't know. He's got a different way of connecting with people. And when I would train with him in Minnesota, we'll get into it when he gets on the program later, but I was one of his first clients. And I think it was like, in terms of hockey guys, it was JVR, Mikey Riley, myself, and then we kind of brought along guys like Nick Bukestad, Derek Forbert, and some other dudes.
How'd you find him, Jordo?
I found him through Mikey.
So Mikey kind of knew of him, and then that's how that group got started?
Yeah, Mikey was working out a little bit with him and JVR because Harvey, back in the day, I believe, was doing stuff at JVR's house. He had a sauna there, obviously lived on Tonka, so you could get the cold baths, especially, early in the offseason, April, May, when it was still cold. So I think he was kind of partnered up with JVR for a little bit, and that's where Mikey ultimately met him. And then when I met Harvey, he was living in Prior Lake, right on the lake. He was renting a shack there and had that wood-burning sauna. That was a trailer, but a sauna. So it was so sick. So he could just move it wherever. Like, you could just put it on the back of the pickup and take it wherever on the hitch. So yeah, man, that's why I first initially met him. And if you remember when we had Brian Peters on the show, Pete was actually transitioning out of playing in the NFL with Houston and started working with Harvey because they're like lifelong friends. They're like childhood friends. So it's a crazy,
Those two are childhood friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. They're kind of into the same thing now, right? Like the breathing and the.
So when Harvey went to San Francisco, he sold Pete Mind Strong, and he ran with that, with the sauna, the ice. Yeah. And that's been his bread and butter ever since, coaching, breath work, all the certain things we were doing at Mind Strong. And then Harvey got more into team issued stuff in the majors. And now he's kind of like, well, I would still like to work with a team, but maybe if I could just be like a general contractor where, I'm just like a freelance worker more so than being tied to a team is kind of, would maybe be his MO. So yeah, it was just, you never know where the talks are going to go with Harvey. You go for a hike or you're just chilling in the sauna. It's always, it's always good shit. So I think that people really enjoy this one. But before we get to that, folks, we are always brought to you by Butter Gulf and Mini Movers. Mini Movers, the official moving company of Live in 5 over here, baby. Butter Golf, the official merchandise company of Live in 5. So go check those out. Golf season coming up. And again, if you need anything moved, you need your shit packed, talk to the captain today. Get a free quote from Ozzo. He will get you dialed in at Mini Movers and minimovers.com. Okay, Ozzo, let's get into it, baby. You were at the state tourney last night, fella. The Green Wave, you got the hat on. They got it done. Uncle Rico and the boys over there at East Grand Forks, the goddamn fucking tidal wave, the Green Wave. How was the match?
It was good. It was late. I think the game started, Jordo, at like 8:45 or something.
Yeah, because that last session is always going to get pushed back, right?
Yeah, it just gets pushed back because, like, they got to announce every player on every team. Before the game. Takes forever. And obviously all these kids have their hair dialed in, they got something they're going to say in the camera. But it was good. It was, Class A. It was the first night, late game. There was a big snowstorm in Minneapolis yesterday. So I don't think like everyone made it down, but it was good. It was nice to get that first win. And now they got to play Hibbing, Jordo, in the semis, which is going to be a tough match.
The Iron Range.
But yeah, like I was telling you, I was telling everyone there, I was like, I think Dusky is actually more passionate about this season and this tournament right now than any of the players. He's all in.
Yeah, he is full Johnny Chan. When I talked to him after they beat Warroad in overtime and saw that celebration of those guys on the bench hugging it out, the coaches, it seems so. And I wanted to ask you, does he have a voice from last weekend's festivities? Because I know, obviously, that big win against Warroad, and then he went into Sarasota, Florida for some wedding. And so how's the voice with Uncle Rico? Is he talking? Is it like day 2 of the golf trip? Oh, it's good. Okay.
His voice is good. I was surprised. Yeah, he sounds and looks like $1 million, Jordo.
Yeah.
Which is great for Dusky because you know as well as I do. I mean, the guy gets talking, he gets yelling, he gets fired up, and he loses his voice.
Yeah, he always overshoots it with the voice. Ozzo, how was the flow in that game? Was there any good flow, or was it just standard? A lot of teams dyeing their hair that bleach blonde, and you go up and skate up to the blue line, say something for mom. Hey, mom, are you watching? Or is there any good flow? Any good dusters, handlebar mustaches? I know it's high school, but you never know.
Some of these kids, some of them look like they're 12, and then you got a couple of them that look like they're 45 years old. Yes. So, you got a good range there. It's funny. I think the hair just gets more and more ridiculous every year. EGF, I don't think Palmo, Dusky, and Dinger and the boys allow the players at EGF to do anything with their hair. They think it's kind of cheesy, which I would agree a little bit. I don't want to sound like an old head, that's trying to take fun away from these kids. But we're here to play hockey, Jordo. We're not here to make the all-hockey hair tournament team. So EGF's hair is normal. But, yeah, there are some kids, Jordo, that have some just crazy hair going. And I don't know, like, these kids put in, like, they didn't just get it overnight. Like, these kids are putting in probably a year's worth of work to get this hairstyle.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a lot of product. We're talking LA looks. We're talking maybe the Axe pomade, and you put it in there, and you just start strumming it with a shitty comb in the locker room at the XL Energy Center. Ozzo, I wanted to ask, what's up with the coaching staff, or what's up for the coaching staff today for EGF? Uncle Rico, obviously last night you maybe had a couple pops with him afterwards, but they got the day off. Are they practicing? Are they at the bar again? What are those guys doing?
I think they're skating at least once today, probably like soon right now or something. And then they'll probably grab some food. Maybe watch the AA games. That's probably what I'd do. I think that's what their plan is. Hopefully these kids can stay out of trouble. They're from East Grand Forks. They're in the big city. They're in high school. They're a little horned up. There's some chicks walking around. Hopefully they can stay dialed in. I think that's part of the battle, being a single A team here coming on a Wednesday, and you got the whole Thursday to kind of you gotta lay low, and it could be tough, when you're one of these high school kids with all that pent up energy.
Yeah, you're used to chicks from fucking Mandan. You're used to girls from Why Not, Minot, even Grand Forks on the North Dakota side, Thompson. You're like, holy shit, where am I right now? It's so funny too when you're that age. Like you're thinking, you want to go to like the Mall of America. You want to do some of the rides. It's just like, oh, high school, baby. And that tournament, Azo, that's where legends are made. I mean, you can.
Oh yeah.
If you put up some numbers, not only on the ice but off the ice there in that tournament, that's one of those things that lives on forever. There's guys that still sit at a place like Bunny's in St. Louis Park and talk about how their tourney was in 1977. Like they remember that. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, they do. And you know what? There's a lot of scouts there too, Jordo. I mean, you can make a name for yourself out there if you have a good tournament.
100%. Azo, I wanted to throw it north with you and just touch on senior night at UND. Now, the boys in North Dakota at Nodak Grand Forks are going into their last weekend of NCHC play before the playoffs start. They got Omaha at home, Azo, and it's crazy. You were a part of a senior night with entirely your whole class missing, so it was maybe a little anticlimactic or even sad in the sense you didn't have the Cowboys, your boys there with Paul Ledoux, Keaton Thompson, Luke Johnson, Stetch. So I wanted to ask you, going into a senior night weekend, what are the thoughts going through your head? Because, again, I wasn't there as well. So what's it like, man? It was always a sad time, even just for being an underclassman, seeing the boys like, fuck, like, this is their last kick at the can, eh?
Yeah, it was honestly, Jordo, I still remember it. I think it was like my worst weekend in college ever.
Yeah.
Like I hated it.
It was just like scary. You just it
was scary. It was scary. The season's coming to an end.
You're only up there with Rink Dog.
I'm up there with Rink Dog. I'm missing. And the whole year probably hindered my play to my senior year, but I was just missing the boys, Tomer, Dewey, LJ, Stetch. I'm up there alone, we're skating around. It just was, it's a tough weekend because it's all coming to an end. And when you're a freshman, Jordo, like you get to school and you're like, okay, like you are fully aware this is the best time of your life.
Yes.
And you're like, I got to make the most of it. This is going to go by quick. Everyone says it. It's going to happen. It's going to go by quick. And then all of a sudden you blink and you're in that weekend yourself. You're a senior like Jake Schmaltz is right now. And you're like, God damn, it's all in the rear view window.
Oh,
like it's a terrible feeling. And I know people like say, you get the senior weekend bump, where you're like, oh yeah, it's going to be tough to beat them on the senior night or whatever. It's like, I didn't really feel that.
Yeah.
I wasn't really pumped to play that game. I was like, fuck, this is my last weekend in the Ralph. I mean, we got a home series, in playoffs, but it's just a tough time.
Yeah, man. I was always weird too. After the game on Saturday, even if you won or swept that weekend, it was sad, man. It was like the seniors were going to go up top. They're going to have a couple beers with Hack or the coaching staff with their parents. And then you'd see them a little bit later on, probably at the party. They'd usually go to the bar with, again, their folks and family in town. And then they would stop by the party. And by that time, yeah, you're half cocked as a sophomore, not thinking anything of it.
Yeah.
But those guys are still like in their suits. And it always looks sad, man. I was like, fuck, this sucks. And after the game, the boys are crying and you're going around giving hugs. It's like, why are we giving hugs already? Like, we still got playoffs and then we got the NCAA tournament. And then fuck, if we make it to the Frozen Four, like we could go on a run here, boys. But in the same breath, especially this season, man, this could be very well one of the last weekends. I hate to say that. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope the boys go on a run. But I think it's even more evident is what I'm saying, Azo, is when you're one of those bubble teams or you're on the outside looking in, because now it's really scary. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's terrifying right now. You're sitting in the UND locker room. You are fully aware that you need to sweep this weekend or your season's probably over. Like, Jordan, if they don't sweep this weekend, they're likely going to Denver.
Yes. That's
and
tough.
Now you got to win 2 games in Denver to keep your season alive. You might as well cue the fat lady. She's going to start singing soon because your season's done. So there's a lot on the line here this weekend. This is like it's almost like a do or die, because I don't care how well you're playing, you're not going to beat Denver twice in Denver.
If they sweep, who would they play? Do we know? If
they sweep, I think they would for sure lock up at least the 4 seed, could be the 3 seed. Denver and North. I think Denver's like 1 point ahead of us. If they lose to Colorado College, they're playing Colorado College. I think we might even play Colorado College. But
okay, I'm looking at it right now. They're tied for 39 points. North Dakota's in 4th right now. Actually, Omaha's pretty good. They got 41 points. They're in 3rd. So basically, Oswald, what you're saying is they got to get to that 3 slot, and then Denver could maybe go to 4. That way, they at least wouldn't have to play them. They play Colorado College or Duluth, is my understanding. Probably CC, UND would play. Yeah. Fuck, CC's pretty good too.
Pretty good. It ain't easy. I mean,
no, but it's better than Denver, obviously, and especially being at home. But fuck, CC.
Yeah, and you just don't want to go to that altitude. I mean, what?
No.
You gotta get home ice. That's if they don't get it, tough.
Yeah, that's tough. Because that CC team, they got a good goaltender. They got a few good forwards. I remember I called a game up there last year, and they were solid. But I mean,
that'll be a 3-game series.
Yeah, that would be. I think they would get it done, dude. Speaking of those 3-game series, oh my god, how brutal were those fucking 3 and 3 showing up on Sunday, and especially that Sunday? Somehow that one year we played CC. Like,
yeah,
it was my freshman year. We went to 3 games, and then I think we swept them both the next years. But my freshman year, we went to game 3 with CC on a Sunday. Maybe it was my sophomore year. You might have been there.
That was my freshman year. That was like to keep our season alive too.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh my god, that 5 p.m. game at the Ralph too. It's a little spooky. It's a little spooky because you're thinking if we lose this one, holy fuck,
I might be done. Stands for that one scratched, but I felt bad for you guys. I was like, I mean, I think I even went out Saturday. I was like, fuck, the boys can't even come out with us, eh? Like they got to play tomorrow.
Yeah, I remember that because it was like Rico, Murph, you guys are like, Jesus, you lost to CC? Holy fuck. Yeah. We came out and whacked them, thank God. But yeah, man, it's going to be interesting. I just think for Jake, it's crazy to think that he's going to be done, but everything does come to an end, Ozzo. You just never think that when that kid's going in as a freshman year. And now it's making me realize, like, holy shit. Like,
I mean, Jake used to visit us like when he was a little kid, it felt like, you know?
Yeah,
like,
well, he did. Yeah, he was like 13 or 14.
And when we were in school, and now he's fucking graduating. It's yeah, I don't even like thinking about that shit.
Time's undefeated, baby. That's what it is, Ozzo. So, yep. To the UND boys up there, stay clean, stay focused. Big fucking weekend. Let's go, Sue. Ozzo, trade deadline is here, and it is underway. And a couple of the names I'm looking at just because we have ties to the program. Speaking of North Dakota, Brock Nelson and Brock Besser. Now, Ozzo, I don't know if you caught that interview of Brock Nelson the other night on the bench after a game at the UBS Arena. Man, that was sad. And if you're Lou Lamoriello and you're looking at that and you're seeing that, especially in real time, you're like maybe thinking about trading this guy, but you can't trade Brock Nelson, can you? Give him the deal he wants. Lou, you're a loyal Italian gangster.
What was he saying, Jordo? I didn't see it.
Yeah, he just basically, they were asking him like, hey, Brock, if this is your last game as an Islander, what does it mean to you? And he started tearing up. He's like, it means everything to me, these fans, this arena. This organization, it's been home forever. And it just, a very candid, emotional interview from a guy that's rather soft-spoken, Ozzy, but doesn't say a lot in general. So you could just tell how much it was weighing on him. And I just hope they can come to a contract there for Brock Nelson because, again, 900 games for the Islanders. He's one of the biggest legends as far as, the last 30 years to play on that team, and especially on the island. He's been through everything with that team. So I was getting a little choked up for him. I'm like, fuck, can't Lou just keep him and sign him?
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you want to go to Winnipeg on a rental? Like, Winnipeg's not going to win.
No. That's we can go there, Jordo. Winnipeg ain't going to win the cup. I'm sorry.
No, it's too cold.
Yeah, those boys ain't winning the cup. I'm sorry. Winnipeg Jets, you got a great team. You guys are all great players. Yep. You're just not going to win the cup. I'm sorry. It is what it is. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's funny to think, Jordo, a kid from Warroad like Brock Nelson, just a small town. I mean, think about going from Warroad to the island,
Insane.
and making it home, and now that's his home. It is, and yeah, it's sad to think like those guys just get attached to those towns. They build a life, and I'm sitting here thinking like, why the hell doesn't he want to leave? What the hell has the Islanders done for him? But yeah, I mean, he's been there forever. He's probably going down as one of the best Islander hockey players of all time. I mean, he's not probably top 5, but yeah, he's been there forever, Jordan, and he's still a hell of a hockey player. He's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy. And shout out to Izzy Marvin, by the way, who loves the Winnipeg Jets. Izzy, no disrespect to your team, and you're a good Warroad chin, but you make it out of the dog days of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and you finally see a sliver of the sun, and that's in April usually. You're thinking, get me the fuck out of here. It just is what it is. And I love the people of Winnipeg. I love the people that live in the Northwest Woods, especially up there in Grand Forks, Ozo, very well. But when you see just that sliver of hope that it could potentially warm up here, the snow's still on the ground. But I don't know if I want to go on a run here all the way till June because, again, the mosquito is the province's national bird, too. So it's like, you got mosquitoes coming in that are the size of vultures. You finally see the sun. You're thinking, just get me to Cabo. Like, subconsciously, that's what you're thinking. It sucks, but that just is what it is. It's too cold to win in Winnipeg. I'm convinced. It's a bit and a theory I have.
Yeah, no, and there's got to be something to that, Jordo. And I don't know if there's like some stat I saw. I don't know how accurate it was, but I believed it. And I'm going to mention it. But it was like it showed what percentage of like all the teams that had players had no trade clauses on them, and I think like Winnipeg had 85% of the players that have no trade clauses had Winnipeg on their list. It's like no one wants to go there. I feel bad for them. Like, cool games. They sell out, cool rink, good team. It's just no one wants to be in Winnipeg. I'm sorry. It's just tough.
No. And I was asking Bess that the other day. I was like, hypothetically, Bess, if you want to get moved, because it sounds like you're not going to get traded re-signed, would you go to Winnipeg? And he said, yeah, I would as a rental. So that's maybe how bad Bess wants to get out of Vancouver, or maybe that's just maybe believes in the team. Azo, I don't know. But he did say he would go there. So who knows? We'll see come Friday. I guess if you're going there as a rental, it's a lot different too.
For sure.
And they got a good team, and then you can play with Scheifele and some of those guys that are
pretty good. You get your own little rental, Airbnb,
or
whatever, and you just sit inside and you're just straight hockey for the next couple months. Like, that's fine.
I remember hearing a story of Kevin Hayes when he got traded to Winnipeg, and they only played a round there. So he was there for like 2 months, and he was living at the hotel connected to the rink. I believe it's the Delta. And he said he just sat in his hotel room the whole time. And I think the following day after they lost, they did their exit meetings, and he was just like packed up, immediately got out of there. He's like, I got to get the fuck out of Winnipeg. But Hayes, a kid from Boston. You know what I mean? Like, we could be all right in Winnipeg. But, imagine Kevin Hayes coming from Boston with New York and then right to fucking Chinnipeg. Oh, my God. And listen, I love the good people of Winnipeg. But if you're coming from New York City to Winnipeg, especially in those dog days of March and oh my God, you're like thinking, what? Is this the only thing to eat? We only have Boston pizza. Oh, I guess there's an Earl's. Yeah. What else do we have?
Well, you're from Wisconsin. I'm from Grand Forks. So like for us, even for us thinking about it, we're looking at Winnipeg as like not as bad as someone from a big city. Someone coming from a big city like that, they're like, what the fuck am I doing in bumfuck nowhere?
It's so funny. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm always rooting for Winnipeg, but it's just the deck is always stacked against them. It's like playing on the Indian reservation, a game of blackjack. So, Azo, we'll see on that as well on the Brocs. Not sure where they're going to end up, but who did make a really nice piece of business, nice item of business was Julien Brisebois of the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Oh.
He reacquired Yanni Gourde, who is an absolute dog on a bone, if you know. It's honestly one of the better pickups I've seen, especially if he can be healthy. And then they added Oliver Bjorkstrand, who is a player that actually lives in Minnesota in the summer, Azo, if you didn't know that. He trains with Jamie at full strength, so I've known him for a while. Yeah, they added him. That's a nice little pickup, too, in your top 6, a guy that can score 20 almost 30 goals a year. So those two pickups, and John Cooper, I actually chatted with him yesterday on Missing Curfew before that, and he didn't really allude to any of that, but those two pickups, that's got to help, fella. I mean, Yanni Gourde, 2-time Stanley Cup winner there, back in Tampa. He's going to be buzzing.
I was looking at their roster, their projected roster with those trades, Jordo. They got a fucking team.
Yeah, they do.
Like
and they got a goalie.
And those boys are in Tampa Bay.
Yes.
They ain't in Winnipeg battling the cold. These boys are happy. They're loose showing up to the rink. They're pumped to be at home. Yeah, that was a great pickup. Those Florida teams, Jordo, those Florida teams are wagons right now.
And the Florida Panthers have 8.75 almost in cap space. So we'll see what they do too. Is it Mikko Rantanen? Can they add maybe some depth pieces like Brandon Tanev or some of these other molds of players that can just really fit in?
Now, who will they go after?
I don't know. Because isn't it funny, those Florida teams, like they're just, and especially the Panthers, obviously, they're just so fucking in your face. But Tampa Bay was like that too in their bottom six when they won their cups too. It's like just like a dog on a bone, like a pit bull coming at you. So I don't know who Florida's going to add. They're linked right now to Mikko Rantanen. How crazy would that be? And how just would you feel if you're Carolina, like just getting caught with your dick in your hand after that trade? You give up Martin Necas, and then essentially you have to flip a guy for nothing because nothing of value is coming back. It might be a couple picks, but at this point, Mikko Rantanen is considered a rental. That sucks. Like you're just like
brutal. And how set in stone is that, Jordo? Is he for sure not going to re-sign there, or?
So they had offered him 8 years at believed just under $13.5 million, and he said no. So clearly he doesn't want to re-sign there. He wasn't able to give them an answer before the deadline. He said, "I'm not sure if I want to sign there," aka I don't want to sign here.
Yeah.
So they're looking to move him, and for the right price. Otherwise, they're going to get nothing for him, man. It's just if you're making that move and you're Carolina, dating back to whenever they made it in January.
How do you not make sure he's going to re-sign there?
Right. How is it not like a sign and trade, or just keep your player Necas, who's arguably almost 100-point scorer this year? What, like, did you not do your homework? They just did that with Gensel the year before, and he walked. They didn't have to give up as much, but they still acquired him at the deadline and thinking they were going to be able to re-sign him. He turns around and signs in Tampa for 9.5. But this one stings even more because you get rid of Necas, man. Like, what? Where was the disconnect? Why didn't you have a conversation of, fuck, if we can't re-sign him, maybe we don't make this deal, because it makes our hockey club worse. They're not going to get anything in return for Mikko Rantanen at this point. That's considerably of value.
Gave up Necas. It's yeah. I mean, if you're the owner of that team, you're definitely thinking like, I might have to get rid of this GM. What the hell is he doing? And
it's his first year. Eric Tulusky. He's just this Harvard nerd. I mean, he's a wizard with cap and managing money. But, Don Waddell went over to Columbus last year. So, we'll see on that front, fella. I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts. Lastly, on the trade deadline talk, I just wanted to touch on Trent Frederick. I love this kid's game, and I think going to Edmonton is a great move, especially something in their bottom six, a guy that can fight. Now, Corey Perry doesn't have to take the brunt of that, being 40-odd years old. And I think Frederick's a player that Edmonton obviously clearly needs some sandpaper in their bottom six. Now, I don't know if they're going to move Evander Kane, maybe Victor Arvidsson, or Jeff Skinner. I don't know if you're going to be able to get rid of any of those guys, but they do want to move one or two of those pieces to acquire a top six scorer. Now, Brock Besser came to my mind on that front, again, circling back to Best, but I just don't think a Canadian team in division will make that move. Like Vancouver already got burned on the JT Miller. There's no way they're moving Best in division to a Canadian team. That just, a lot of the times these guys operate out of fear, Ozzo, and if you already get cooked one time during the season, you're not going to do it again. No, and you're not going to go hand them to Edmonton so you can get Brock Besser coming back into your, what's it called? Is it the Rogers place? Rogers Arena? Yep. Yeah, you're not going to want Besser wearing the Oilers jersey coming back into Rogers Arena putting up 2 goals against you. There's no way they do that. Yeah, or winning a cup, and it's like, oh my God, we just gave away Besser and they won a cup. Yeah, that just, they wouldn't do that, especially with Jimmy Rutherford managing, and Patty Alvine. They already got burned on that deal. So yeah, man, it's gonna be interesting. This time of year is exciting. I like the old school July 1st when the signing day was always the most exciting day on TSN, but I still think there's a lot of moves to be made. A lot of guys floating out there. So we'll see Azo on that front. I wanted to touch on, and I wanted to throw it over to the hard courts of the Indian Wells. The Indian Wells is taking place this weekend into the following week. One of the best non-major tournaments in all of tennis. I could probably compare it in golf to the players.
Yep.
So we got all the big dogs are there Saturday. I want to get there so bad and watch the women's singles. I just don't know if I'm going to be able to fit it in. I'm going to Salt Lake on Sunday to watch Nikki play, but man, Emma Navarro going off on Saturday, Sabalenka. You got all the big dogs on the men's side. This tournament I'm hearing is nasty. Like people in Palm Springs say it's sick.
Yeah, and you're in Palm Springs. That's got a vibe to it.
It does.
I like that name too, Indian Wells. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like the name of a tourney has a little bit to do with it, and cool name for a tennis tournament. And Palm Springs is such a sick place too.
Yeah, anytime you can throw a little Indian into something, it's always good, right?
Always
get on the Indian land. Yeah, Palm Springs is cool. It's a vibe. It's a little gay. Honestly, it's like the kind of like
I think that's it is
gay capital.
Yeah,
like you're walking around. You're like there's a lot of dudes with
the gay guys like it there.
Yeah, they do.
They're vibing there.
Yeah, they
Can't
do.
blame them.
No, it's the desert, baby. So it's all good. Azo, I am going to do a People's Insider Term of the Week for the people. And this week's People's Insider Term of the Week is bunk. Now, bunk can mean a lot of different things. It's a fancy way to say you scored a goal. Like, how do you score that one there, fella? Oh, short side bunk, where grandma keeps the Percocets. So bunk can be translated into another way to say maybe you got laid the following night or the previous night. Just, hey, fella, how'd it go? Yeah, I bunked. So it's a way to say something and articulate something where you don't have to seem so aggressive or in your face, and the boys at the table sitting there will understand it while the general public may not. So bunk was always a word used in terms of just in the locker room with scoring a goal, like, fella, fucking rights. That was a sick bunk. So that is a way to use it. And then again, maybe if you got something done off the ice, late night out, and you're like, how'd it go? Yeah.
Bunked.
I bunked, fella. And you're like, you give the guy nucks and you continue on your day. So Azo, that is the People's Insider Term of the Week. It's short and sweet, but do you have anything else on bunk?
No, I like that one. And I liked how you said, Jordo, that it's something you can say in public. You know, you find yourself stung, let's say at a Denny's or an IHOP or something. You don't want to be the guy saying, yeah, I fucked her last night. You know,
no,
you don't
I gotta kill.
That. Yeah. But like, if you say I bunked, the family sitting next to you is going to be like, what do you say? I don't know.
Yep.
And they're just going to go on with their day. So that was a great point to that, Jordo. And that's why some of these terms are important to use, because you don't want to be, sometimes they are undercover and you don't want other people to know what they mean.
Exactly. Yep. So you always can throw that in there and sneak it in. And most people, general public, won't know what it means, boys. So that is the People's Insider Term of the Week is bunk. Azo, lastly, my friend, what do you got on the weekend, fella? It is Thursday. It's ladies' night. These people will probably hear it on Friday. Into the weekend, are you state tourney all weekend? Are you at Tom Reed's having a stiff whiskey? What's on tap here? Just going to ride the wave, no pun intended, and see how far these boys go?
Yeah. I think I'm just going to ride the wave. Now I got to go. I think the wave are playing 1:00 on Friday. I'm going to do my best to make it. I do have to work, but yeah, it's Gabby's out of town, Jordo.
Okay.
She's out of town for a couple, I think another week yet. Perp just texted me. Coley's going to be out of town. And I think we're trying to draw John Simonson down to the cities. So
wow.
It could end up being, a really good weekend for us. So
this could turn into an old school runner. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, it might be a runner. I'm kind of fired up for it.
Well, you got to take advantage of those. weekends, weeks, because, as much as you miss the gal, it's sometimes the boys are calling. And if you got two of them out of town and John Simonson, now it takes two to tango. You add Simonson to the mix, and you got Uncle Rico, who is a dangerous breed in his own right. If he's not on that bench, you never know where he's going to be. He's not going to say no. So that's a hell of a little tandem. You get Bryn Chiswick involved. That's a nice little pocket there. You might have to call up old Nicky Matson, see what he's doing.
Oh yeah, I always try to get Nicky Matson out. As well as I do, it's tough sometimes, but he's always a great guy to have around. I'd love to have him with us, Jordo. Obviously, to kind of pump my tires a little bit on the jokes. He's always good for a laugh. Gives you confidence on your jokes, and just a great dude to have around.
Yeah, he is the best. So I'm going to be watching the Sioux this weekend, Ozzo. I'm going up to Utah Sunday to see Nicky. They're playing Willie Styles. So make one of those dipshits buy me a meal on Sunday. And then I'm going to watch that game. I'm fired up for it.
Sick.
Toronto, Utah making a push here.
Yeah,
they're
playing well.
They're not out of it. They're not out of it.
And now you get to, are you going to hang out in that players lounge that they got for him after the game? Probably. Is that where you guys going to eat? Or?
I think so. I'm doing a content series with Tyson Nash, and we're sitting on the glass. So we're going to do that's going to be on the Monday. So we're going to sit there. I'm hoping Smitty, I put in a word with the Utah Hockey Club and their social media department. Can we get Ryan Smith on the program, just because that would look good, just selfishly dapping up an owner sitting right on the glass, and then the hockey club, they drop that on all their socials, so that would look good. But yeah, definitely going to try to run into Smitty. I actually DM'd him on Twitter because I don't want to ask Nick for his number or something like that. So I DM'd him because Smitty, he runs fives every morning at 5 a.m. They're on the hardwood every morning.
Really?
He's a big hooper. So I sent Smitty a DM, and I said, you know what, Smitty, fella, I'm going to be in Utah on Sunday through Tuesday. Would love to get on the hardwood with you. My player comparable is Manu Ginobili, but I'm like a second or third hand store Ginobili. So let me know if you need a lefty for your game. And needless to say, he hasn't responded yet. So who knows if
he's a busy man, though. He's probably got he'll get to it.
For sure. Yeah, he'll always throw me a couple tweets here and there. So we'll see on that front. If I get on the wood with him, that would be unbelievable. But yeah, man, gonna head to Utah. So I'm thinking, I don't know if I should bring my fucking ski boots and get some rental skis and hit the slopes there, because that Alta is pretty good, right? Some of those places closer.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not looking like one of those places closer, and there's like Snowbird too, I think I skied at. It's not like, big time skiing, but there's not a ton of lines, and it's still a great time with some great runs. So
yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. So yeah, maybe I'll dust off the boots. But
I got the outdoor hot tub up top, the nice spa area. I always used to take advantage of that place. It was unbelievable.
Nice soak. Nothing better than a good soak.
Yeah.
All right, Ozzo. Well, let's send it over to Harvey Martin, folks. I think you'll enjoy this one. A little bit different than we usually do, but we always like to have interesting cats on the program over here at Live in 5. So Ozzo J. Swish, that was episode 78, pre-show, tape to tape with you, Captain, all day. Go sweat it out, fella. And again, I'll be tuned into the Green Wave. Hopefully Uncle Rico and the boys over there on the east side of Grand Forks can get it done against Hibbing, those old Iron Rangers, the next matchup. So I'll be tuning into that, man.
Yeah, should be a good weekend, Jordo.
All right, baby. Folks, hope you enjoyed that. Again, going to Harvey Martin right now, low and slow. Enjoy your weekend, fellas. All righty, folks, welcome back to another episode of Live in 5. A very special guest today, a guy I used to work with when I was playing the game of ice hockey, a breath coach, just a modern day philosopher, if you will, as well as, we used to do some training back in the day. So former mental skills and performance coach of the San Francisco Giants, longtime friend of the show and current Arizona resident, Harvey Martin, fella. What's up? It's good to see your chin, baby. How you doing?
I'm living well, man. I appreciate that intro. I got to tell you, I've been a fan of this since day one, so I'm a little nervous. I'll just be honest with you.
Well,
boys.
settle in.
I'm a little nervous. Yeah, I'll settle in, but I maybe have to do some breathing. I'm just a little nervous.
Well, yeah, you get that. What you used to teach us back in the day, and you still do, is you got to breathe below that diaphragm, right? Get that
Let's
low
pull
stroke.
the air in. Yeah, you got to pull the air in. You got to be nice. Hey, so, what do you call low and what do you call
low and slow, baby?
Slow and slow, baby.
Low and slow.
So yeah,
Harv,
that would work. That would work in the breathing.
Yeah, for sure. So Harv, I wanted to just take us back through memory lane, kind of how we connected back in the day. I think I was one of the original, I would say, not founding fathers of Mind Strong, but just, one of the first horsemen you worked with back in the day in Minnesota. I remember showing up to your place you were renting in Prior Lake. We were doing a bunch of different breathing techniques. We were doing things where we would tape our mouth. We do some conditioning drills. We use the sauna. You had the wood burning sauna was unbelievable. And then we get in the cold, and then we'd even get in Prior Lake and do different techniques to work on our breathing and our overall just mental conditioning. So do you remember those days, brother? I know we went down memory lane when I came on your podcast, but those were the good days, just showing up once or twice a week. Me and Mikey, that's Mikey Riley, who plays for the New York Islanders, but we had a small, tight crew, man. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really was, man. I mean, that was around COVID time too, a little bit, right?
Yep.
I mean, so it's funny. I was talking to Bukestad the other day about when we couldn't use gyms any longer. I had days where once a week I'd take Bukes into the woods, and you couldn't touch the floor of the woods. You had to be able to make sure like 45-minute of movement where you're either hanging from trees or you're walking on branches. And it was funny because we were laughing about how we used to do that as kids. But yeah, man, you're right. We had a really small, intimate group. We were backyard. We were in the woods. We were jumping in lakes. We were doing stuff in the wood burning saunas. And I think like the things that I miss the most about those days was the social connection of that, right? Because obviously we were training, and I'm trying to be a coach and play that role. You guys are, trying to be players and play that role. But ultimately, I mean, think about how many times we had just having conversations in a sauna or jumping in a lake. And I think ultimately that was actually like the magic of those days, is it was the intimate group connection while we were also like trying to train. But the conversation was electric to me.
So how did you get started with Mind Strong? Obviously, I know your past. You were a baseball pitcher. You played pro. You played at Mankato as well as Central Michigan. Shout out to the Chippewas fella, by the way.
Chips.
Let's go Chips. But how did you get into that space of overall just human performance, breath work, meditation, and ultimately, we were training together too, just doing different things of how to use basically all four limbs, climbing, just a lot of cool different crawling, just technique. Yeah. How did you get into that space to work with high level athletes?
Yeah, man. I mean, I played professionally with the Brewers for a bit, so that obviously always helps. Just having like a past in professional sports. But I think that for me, when I came out of sports, there was a couple of things that I saw, and I was in a mental skills, mental performance avenue that I really liked when I was studying in school playing. And then when I got released, I saw like a hole that was, I saw what I thought was like something that was being missed in performance. I didn't know if it was supposed to be called physical performance, mental performance. I wasn't quite sure what world that was going to be, but I thought that mental performance was entirely based on psychology, which is fair. And it sounds like that, but it was seeming like that was all it was. It was this subjective thought experiment, mental skills training. And then I looked at physicality being strength training, and it seemed like it was tangible, objective training. It was like no subjectivity. So it was all, to me, it was like radical on both sides. And that didn't make sense to me when I first started training. I was like, I don't see how you can be a strength coach and not be a mental skills coach. I don't understand how you can be a mental skills coach and not be a strength coach. And one of the things that I found that bridged the gap between those two was purely breath work, because breathing is the one thing that lives in everybody that is both unconscious and conscious. And it works in all three funnels of the human organism: anatomy, physiology, and psychology. So to me, I want anything that happens in an anatomy route, which would be strength conditioning, movement, if you will. Breathing makes sense. Anything in a recovery route, so physiology, controlling the nervous system, stress or adapt, whatever that is. Well, that makes sense because that's going to be a breath in the physiology. And then psychology being your meditative, your deeper states of consciousness, et cetera, et cetera. Well, breathing makes sense. So to me, I wanted to never choose a side. I didn't want to be physical or mental. And that's where I think human performance kind of like umbrellaed that. And it kind of allowed me to live in both worlds. And the foundation of everything that I figured I was going to do was breathing, because of what I just said. It was aligned with all 3 parts of the organism, and it's involved in your unconscious, which just naturally means your automatic functionality of your human body. And then it's controlled in your consciousness. So your conscious movement, you can consciously change breathing and shift the way in which you're thinking, heart rate, et cetera, et cetera. So that was what became my bread and butter. And I think that a lot of that formed through when I was playing, and just like stuff that I was curious about myself. And I think that was what has even led me 10 years later to what I do for now that I do this for full time, obviously, and have had a career out of it. I think it was just like I was curious about breath. I've always been curious about holisticness and being able to see everything from both sides. And I think that that's like what drove me, was first of all being curious in and of myself, and then 2, I just saw like gaping holes in performance, and that's what I just explained.
Harvey, how long have people been working on their breathing like you are? Or is it something that's newer? Have they been doing it for a while? And is there new stuff that comes out every year as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think the first thought to that is how long. I mean, it's the longest, right? And I think that's the practice that I really enjoy, is that breathing is, and one of the things that I can understand, it's a 5,000-year-old practice. And it started largely in yoga and movement. One of the main principles of yoga is if you can't breathe in a position, you don't own the position, which in any sport, if you start to compensate or you get hurt in anything, any sort of movement, you can't breathe in that position. So like that philosophy is thousands of years old. And that's something that I've actually found a ton of confidence in. It's the same thing with like acupressure, just a little sidebar part, but it's like I'll use a lot of stuff with standing on nails or standing on acupressure to kind of use your feet to train your nervous system. And sure, there's like literature and science to that right now that's like modernly being used. Like we're using these styles, these simple practices, but that's also one of the oldest practices available. So I think like for specifically in breathing, it's an age-old practice and it's used in everything. I think what's happening about it being modern, and I'm sure we can dive into some of the philosophy of all this stuff, I think the modern landscape is starting to put a magnifying glass over the top of it and seeing the importance of it. And it's almost creating a re-emerging effect because of the landscape of our society now, because now we're massively overstimulated and we're largely disconnected from nature. So the fascinating thing about that, I guess, that answer in full form is that it's got to be, if not the oldest, it's arguably one of the oldest practices. And it's weirdly coming back into our world because of where our world is at. So yeah, I don't, does that answer that?
Yeah. No, that was a great answer. I mean, so does like grounding have anything to do with this? You know, like you see like JJ McCarthy taking his shoes off and the one guy on one of the football teams, I forget his name, walks into the stadium without any shoes on. Does this have any correlation between that stuff?
I think so. I think it's all in the same vein, right? Because grounding is you're using, it's like a battery. Like you work like a battery. I don't know if this is the best example, but these are examples that I use, right? Like if you have what do they call? What are the things? The electric. Why am I drawing a blank? The electrical wires that are all around our cities.
Yeah.
The power lines.
Yeah.
So like a power line goes into the earth to use electricity. It needs energy, right? So the earth literally becomes like a positive and a negative charge. So you basically just think of the earth and cut it in half. The air and everything we're here, we'll just call it positive, and below is negative. So it's just one big battery. Mm-hmm. And you essentially are a battery in and of yourself. So grounding, and this is going back to what I just said, is it's reemerging as a thing that's becoming scientifically proven to us, because it's very recent that we've put rubber on our feet and stopped that electrical positive and negative charge. So the example to that is like if we were driving and a lightning bolt hit our car, the thing that would keep us safe is the rubber wheels. And so if you think of like walking around with rubber all day, well, then you stop that charge. So you stop the flow that works from your feet all the way up to your head, and that blood flow and that movement. So grounding in that scenario, when we just simply take our shoes off and we're taking away the rubber, if you will, Now, all of a sudden, we start to charge. You just have a positive and negative charge. You create a homeostasis, like a balance type state. Now, why I would say that that's as equally charging to breathing, because I mentioned breathing's unconscious, right? So if you go into a charging state, in this example being grounding, the nervous system naturally goes into what's called parasympathetic, rest and adapt. It's an adaptive state. And when you're parasympathetic, your breathing naturally slows down without you having to think about it, right? Like if all three of us got together and I said, hey, let's breathe slow through our nose consciously, sure, you're controlling that consciously. But if I go, hey, let's go for a barefoot walk and let's just be calmer, and you'll feel that, if you guys have done that, I'm sure, like you feel how calm it is to be in nature and barefoot. So naturally, the nervous system will shift into a calming parasympathetic, which innately makes you breathe slower. So it's like, which one's which, right? It's like, are you focusing on breathing slow, or are you grounding? Are you focusing on grounding, or whatever? It doesn't, I don't think it really matters. I would definitely say they're both in the same lane for sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that was a great answer.
So what he's saying, Oslo, right there is don't wear a rubber. Just take away. But Harv, I wanted to ask you. You were doing breath work. You were doing grounding. All these different things. Like before, it was cool. Before everyone on Instagram was talking even about cold tubs, you were pushing for that sauna, ice, breath work, meditation, grounding, all this stuff. But I think the one thing that related to sport the best, at least for me, was being able to downshift, being able to take your heart rate from max around 200 to get as low as 130, and in a hockey game to recover for the next shift. Yeah. So when we talk about downshifting, we talk about breathing. I think that was what took my cardio level to the next state in terms of really heightening how much output I could have, because I not only trusted myself to recover, I just had so much more confidence knowing like I could go full tilt and I wouldn't come back to the bench and I would be breathing like a dog out of my mouth. It was almost like machine-like. So can you touch on that, and just in terms of, how you really developed that method or what you studied? Because I thought that was the biggest thing for me.
So the direct question is like, how did I get that method of downshifting, or how did I get that method of everything?
And just even teaching that, because that was like the biggest thing that stuck for me.
Yeah, no, I remember that too, specifically. I think that you, as a teacher, right, you got to get creative to meeting people where they're at. And so breathing, everybody does it. The point of meeting where everybody's at is that's kind of the gift or the art of being a teacher, is you have to meet a hockey player. A hockey player has a unique set of systems compared to a shortstop in baseball, where a baseball player, a right fielder in baseball, might never get a ball for 9 innings, right? So think about how much you're just standing there and thinking and processing. Now, you could say, okay, well, then what does breathing matter? And I could be over breathing. My heart rate could be high. Why would it be that if I'm a right fielder in baseball and I didn't get any balls? It's a very accurate question. And it's something that makes baseball, to even a fan, seem rather slow. Whereas hockey, maybe you don't score a goal, or you don't have any action, but like you're on the ice every shift, like letting it rip, right? And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it's just like you're kind of like high heart rate, and then you're going back into the bench, and then you kind of get a feel for how a person on their line shifts, or are they in the first line or the fourth line, and you kind of get an idea of how much time they're going to be spending on the ice, how much time they're going to spend on the bench. Now, where I use both the baseball and the hockey analogy right there is because if you're familiar with any of this, there was a really cool, some cool literature that came out recently about chess, and chess players burn somewhere around 6,000 calories a match. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this or not, but it's like it's like in the world championships, like the world master chess players burn more calories than, I think it was in comparison to like a tennis player. And the reason why I use that is because they're processing thinking and problem solving so aggressively that their breath rate goes up. And that means their heart rate goes up. So now if they're doing this for 10 hours, they're burning fuel while they're just sitting there. And I use that in comparison to baseball, because baseball is the slowest game to play, but it's the fastest game on your breathing and your mind, because you're just processing thoughts for hours. And that's why it's so draining, even if you didn't get anything. And so why I'm sharing this before I get to your answer, Schmaltzy, is that because thinking is the same. It's all energy. Thinking and mental and physical, they're all the same. Where the hockey player might exert all this energy and overbreathe and have a higher heart rate and a higher respiratory rate through movement, the baseball player is doing the exact same thing and they're not moving. And that's in correlation to how the organism is always doing the same thing. So if I'm meeting somebody where they're at, I have to learn their craft. If I'm learning hockey, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but from spending time with a lot of you guys don't have time to think as much as a chess player or a hockey or a baseball player. You are really reactionary, and you're on and off. It's all reaction. You're playing defense, offense, you're moving back and forth. And so for hockey, when you're meeting those guys, in my opinion, it becomes largely winning the game of breath and winning the respiratory game. Because if you can't downshift when you get on the bench, which you should only take 2 to 3 minutes to bring your heart rate back down to baseline. If you can't do that, then you want to think of your actual or energy. I'm connecting this all back to energy as like a fuel tank, a gas tank. And a hockey player who burns fuel through their gas tank on the bench, they're just going to become more reactionary as the game goes on instead of responsive. They're not going to have access to motor skills. They're going to fatigue out. They're not going to be able to think or see clearly in the third period because they weren't able to manage fuel. And that's where I think when you think of hockey specifically, it's kind of like, why wouldn't you find access to, when I go on ice, I'm going to mouth breathe, pant, overbreathe, high heart rate, play as hard as I can, whatever, do my thing. Why wouldn't I have a gearing system when I come off the ice with a 2 to 3 minute buffer period and be able to controllably downshift my breath while my heart rate completely mimics your breath rate? So the heart rate will naturally come down, like you just mentioned. And now all of a sudden you're on the bench for the last minute or so, and you didn't take fuel away from your gas tank. And so you can actually sustain a game, which sustains games, plural, which sustains months, which should, in theory, sustain a year in a career. And I just think that just in a lot of sports like that, again, it's not that people wouldn't do that. It's largely just because people aren't aware of what we're talking about. Like it's not on top of mind. It's just like, it's not seen as you're not seeing everything as energy. And I think when you have a perspective or a view like that, and you view everything as fuel and energy, well, you only want to give up energy when you're supposed to. You should only stress when you stress. You should only fight when you need to fight. Other than that, like everything, in my opinion, should be focused on adaptation, which is where breathing goes back to the beginning of the conversation. Breathing is the only thing in the unconscious environment that is in our bodily functions that you can make conscious. So you cannot come off ice and talk yourself into slowing down. Like you can't do that. You can't go, heart rate, need you to drop so I can go out and make that actual pass. Like you can't do that. You can only physiologically change the design of your body through breathing. And then you'll see thoughts come back to you, and you'll see thinking and problem solving come back to you. And I saw, when I was working a lot with hockey, I saw that as like a massive miss, in my opinion.
For sure. And Harvey, just so obviously we're kind of referring to athletes right now, and obviously this is very important to athletes. Now, is this something I should try to tell my mother, who's almost damn near retired and kind of sits around all day? Is this something she should implement in her life, or is this kind of just more geared towards, athletes and highly stressful individuals who have, important jobs or something like that?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. I mean, I think for me, just because of my Rolodex of people, I talk in sports because that's who I'm around. But I mean, we're all human. And I really think that this is, again, perspective wise, but to me, I think that the classroom that all of us are currently in is the teacher to awareness. And how well can you become aware of awareness, in my opinion, is the whole point of being a human. So right now we're playing the character of being a podcaster. Like I'm not coaching, I'm trying to be a podcast guest, and I'm playing this role as best as I can. And if I played baseball, I'm playing that role as best as I can. And so if I zoom out of that, what I mean about that philosophically is essentially what I think is that we are all, in essence, we're all some spiritual, energetic thing. And we play life from birth until we die through a vehicle, mind and body vehicle. So your grandma is a mind and body vehicle just like the NHL center, mind and body vehicle. But regardless, both parties are some spiritual essence of themselves. And so to become aware of your awareness, again, I'll go back to it because it's a super 1,000-year-old practice. Breathing has become the sustainable practice of learning who you are. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, yes, this has nothing to do with high performers. I think it just comes out of me so often because that's where the world I'm in. That's the platform that I play on. But yeah, I don't think that should be only secluded to that field at all. I think everybody should become aware of their awareness.
I kind of knew what you would say to that, but I think that's good. You know, I can tell my mom that she should still probably work on herself, you know, even though she doesn't have a ton of work to do.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Harv, I wanted to ask you, some of the most beautiful saunas in the world are in Finland. And I spent a year there. You've been to Finland. You are a sauna connoisseur, I would say. And I just wanted you to touch on not only just the Finnish culture in sauna, and I can kind of echo that, but how you got into basically this overall depth of sauna and cold, in not only why it's important, but just how it makes you feel.
Yeah. Well, I think sauna and cold is a drug, first of all. I think it's a holistic medicine that has come from nature. It's been blessed upon us. And if you know it, you know it. And if you don't, you don't. Right? So it's as simple as that. And I think if you are into sauna, Finland is the capital of that in the world. And there's a lot of stuff that you can dive into the history of this, right? Traditionally speaking, the sauna has been seen for thousands of years as a spiritual teacher. So when you are in heat, and this is why even unconsciously as a modern species, we'll be at a health fitness club. Think about people who get drunk and they go sauna and they go, I'm sweating out the demons, right?
Yeah, the old demon locker.
Yeah, and at the surface, that's like somewhat comical, but it's at its depths, it's unbelievably understood as truth, because that is what you're doing. You're sweating out poison, you're sweating out toxins. And so why I use that parallel is because historically the sauna has been used as a spiritual endeavor. It's like a natural psychedelic. And so if you view heat sacredly, as I do, and I feel like a lot of people that I roll with would view heat in a sacred space, now all of a sudden you need to pursue the highest quality heat. And so to me, I was exposed, a decade or so to wood burning saunas in Minnesota, which is, as you guys know, it's Scandinavian America. That's where in America, that's basically Finland. Like if you go to Finland, I feel like you're just in Minnesota.
Yeah, that's true.
And so we also live at similar parts of the globe and the Arctic Circle, and we're not as high. I'm not saying we're like I'm in Minnesota, but I lived in Minnesota for a long time, but it's not as high as Finland necessarily, or these Scandinavian countries. But Finland, half of that country is in the Arctic Circle. So think about how high that is on the globe, right? And one of the things that drew me to Finland was years ago, I started looking at Western states, being America, that lived in northern areas that didn't spend a lot of time in the sun. And I started seeing the high rates of depression and the high rates of anxiety and basically like the obesity and the drinking and the substance abuse that people use to get through dark, cold winters. And then all of a sudden I go, well, how is it possible that on the other side of the globe, this other country that's somewhat higher than these American states is reported as the happiest country in the world? Like, how is that possible? And that was the only question I came up with. Like, how is that a thing? And when you look so obviously I had to go to Finland. And when you go to Finland and you see people, and this was the biggest thing that I noticed, people for artistic, spiritual pursuits swim in the Baltic Sea. In Schmaltz, I'm sure you saw this a lot. They have the ladders that go up and out of the water.
I did it.
Yeah, and so did I, right? And if you notice, people were doing that, and they weren't doing it for commerce. They were doing that as a way of life. And what I know and what I see in America is we created sauna and ice for commercial reasons. It's become a business, which makes sense. We're in a capitalistic country and everything becomes commercialized. But in the sense of what I noticed over there is people were legitimately taking their clothes off in the dead of winter, swimming in the Baltic Sea, coming out, drying off, putting their clothes on, and going to a coffee shop. and living their day. And that simple, profound thing was enough for me to see that Finland was built a culture around traditional practices that are thousands of years old, and it brings it back to the sacredness. Finns, for thousands of years, they started their house by the sauna. And as your family grew in resources, you would add rooms. But if you built a house, first and foremost, you built a sauna. So people were giving birth in saunas. They were doing prayer in sauna. They were showering and bathing. They'd sweat and then rinse themselves off in sauna. Obviously, that was handling the darkness of that country and the cold that's in that part of the world. And then all of a sudden, you get into a place where I could be off on these numbers, but I'm sure I'm close. That's 5 million people there today in the 21st century. And they account for, I think, 3.3 or 3.5 million saunas. And I haven't done that research in quite a few years, but I'm sure it's pretty accurate. So now all of a sudden, just think about that. Like, that heat is literally baked into the health of a country. And if you just look at the finale of what they report as being the happiest people on the planet. And they're in an extremely cold, dark, harsh climate. And so, yeah, if you dive into that, you see Finns don't mess around. From my experience, the Finns don't mess around with cheap saunas. They're not going to Costco and buying the $1,500 one because everyone else has one. Like, they are taking that very serious and very deep. And as a byproduct, I think they reap a ton of benefits.
Yeah, it's crazy that every Finnish household has a sauna. Like, my 2-bedroom apartment that was roughly 1,000 square feet had an amazing sauna in it right next to the shower. Every guy had a sauna in his place. Every import that was renting a place had a sauna. There were saunas all over the city around the Baltic Sea. And I just thought the cool thing, and we've chatted about this before, Harv, is when you go to those community saunas, and especially the hardcore places, Azo, in Helsinki, in Finland, wherever you are, and they realize that you're a foreign guy or probably an American, they're going to try to smoke you out. So they get that sauna to about 230 degrees, and then they wait for you to either tap out or stay in there until you pass out. And when you do end up leaving, they just like laugh at you in their little shitty Finnish.
They think they're all tough because they're sitting there longer than you. You can't. You can't sit in the oven, buddy. It's soft.
Because
100%.
Because Finland does have a sauna world championship or a country championship, so they all sit in there, Azo.
Really?
And it's
last
the
man standing type
last
thing?
man standing. The last guy to get smoked out wins. But anywhere around the city, any of the hardcore places, and Harvey knows this because I think a fella tried to smoke you out, but you stayed in the fight.
I was 2 for 2. I didn't lose any of my battles.
Isn't it funny though that like they see you?
They're actually getting it up to 230 because
and they steam it regularly.
Like 200 to me, like 10 minutes for me, I'm out.
It's the type of heat that burns your ears.
You
need one of those Russian hats. It's brutal.
I had a guy in Estonia on the other side of the Baltic that was trying to steam me out, and we were both naked in there because they all sauna nude, right?
Yep.
It was just me and this dude and our significant Chelsea. We were dating, I think, at the time. We weren't married yet, and his significant other. And he didn't speak English, so we didn't speak the same language. And he kept trying to smoke me out. And Chelsea ended up leaving, and I just sat with this guy and battled with him. And neither of us speak the same language. We weren't really looking at each other. And after a while, I think he was ready to be done. And he looks up at me and he just starts laughing. And when he starts laughing, I start laughing because I'm like dying. I want to leave. And he points outside the sauna at a bucket of beers. And he goes, essentially, like, you want to just go have some beers and call it? And that was it. Went and had a beer with that guy. I don't know his name. Never saw him again.
Oh, that's unreal. So the wood burning or the hot rocks, like some of the saunas you can get steam in there. Some of them are dry. Some of them are those infrareds. Yeah. So what would you say is the best one that you should have? If I got a backyard and I'm gonna put one up,
I would get the wood burning no matter what. And I'll give a little shout out. I don't get paid for this one, so I'll go show them love because I love their stoves. But Kuma stove in northern Minnesota is the best wood burning stove I've found in the country. But I would get wood burning, non-negotiable, and have that in the backyard and go through the process of creating your own heat.
Okay.
That wood burning is unbelievable. That trailer you used to have, Harv?
Oh my gosh.
It was the best, dude.
Well, the thing about the wood burning, and I tell a lot of my friends in town here that want to go the electric, which is no doubt it. Again, going back to what we're talking about, in the modern landscape, it's go, 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 right? So you want to have something to leave the gym, press on your Bluetooth, and have your sauna heat ready when you get home. I definitely get that and respect and understand that. But there is nothing like chopping your own wood and piecing that together, putting that into an oven, starting a fire, and watching that thing burn and listen to it crackle and the smells that come out of that, and being able to steam your own heat and have like a radiant oven that can burn for a while. If you've done that and you understand that, there's no way you want to have electric, in my opinion.
Yeah, man. Like even the one you had, Harv, in Minnesota, just getting that ready, like the prep work, like you said, and then just like waiting for it it's almost like a spiritual experience. And then all the boys go in there and hang out. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. Well, you make your own heat, and that goes back to, it's like when you cook dinner versus ordering dinner in. It's not that the dinner is ever bad, but I think we all know which one's better. You know, when you cook your own meal and it tastes good, there's a soulful experience to that, and there's a process to that. Yeah, waking up in the morning. I used to wake up around 5:36 in the darkness of winter, and I would start that fire, and it would be like 65, 70 degrees. So it was doable for the beginning. And I would sit in there and have coffee in the morning with the fire light kind of allowing me to read and hang out and meditate. And then by the time it hit 180, I put everything away and I saunaed. And it was like a 3-hour morning. And at 9 a.m., then I went and did my day. But I wouldn't have that any other way. I would do that. I would do that again if I lived up there.
For sure.
Yeah.
Harv, I wanted to get into the last few years with the San Francisco Giants.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I had finished up playing, but prior to that, before you took that job, I remember us talking, I was going to take an opportunity in the majors, obviously, to fulfill a dream that you weren't able to make it as a player, but now as a coach. And you spent 3 or 4 years with the Giants. Just want to talk about just the overall experience, how maybe receptive the guys were right away to where they kind of came over your time. I mean, you were basically a guidance counselor for these guys, a breath coach, a friend to lean on. I think you're just a jack of all trades. So talk to me through just that experience of being in the majors and, transition and maybe out of it for now, but maybe find your way back. Who knows, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I think that I was actually just asked this the other day because I am talking to a few teams for this next year, which I may do, I may not. We'll see what happens. That's the lineup for the family and whatnot. But I think for me, like as a player, I mean, you guys get that as an athlete, right? I grew up, I wanted to play in the big leagues. Ever since I can remember, my uncle played in the big leagues, won a World Series. My dad was a bullpen catcher with the Tigers. My grandpa was a college athlete. I was influenced by people who played in the show. And I had people who told me stories about the show. And I was also incredibly talented growing up. I mean, I thought I was going to get drafted out of high school. I didn't. I ended up signing out of college a few years later. But I was always a prospect. And I always knew that I'd probably play professionally. And, it's funny because the thing that's coming into my memory right now is I remember I went to spring training, I think in 2014. And they used to do this thing where they did 30 for 30, and ESPN would go around and they would do 30 day. They do a day each day in spring training with a team, whatever. And I was there early in 2014, and I was out playing catch with in a group of 4. I was one of the 4, and all of us, they were all big leaguers. One of them was Ryan Braun, which I've never met since this day, and Carlos Gomez. I think Kyle Loesch was in there, and just like some big name Brewers, right? Mm-hmm. And then you had all these cameras and ESPN. And I remember the moment that I was throwing, knowing that I'd be in like a background of a ESPN thing on sports or on whatever on the camp. I remember thinking I couldn't play catch. I could only think about the fact that I was around Ryan Braun. Like I couldn't like do the job. And it took me a few years to come into grips with what I'm saying right now, but that was kind of the moment that I definitely would have never made to the big leagues. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that. And so when I finally got released and I had a few years to really digest and reflect on my career, I started realizing how mystical I had a thing in my mind. And I was so close that it scared me, even though I would have never been able to tell you that in the moment, but it was too big for me. And so mentally I've always wanted to be with the highest performing people in general. I just like gravitate towards those people's minds. I love the behavior of people trying to be perfect. I hate that I love this, but this is a truth. And you guys know this of high performing people. There's a shadow that's equally as large as the positive. And so to me, to try to figure out how to help people learn the shadow, that's just like what I do. That's what I like doing. So in order to do that as a coach, I got to be in the big leagues, or I got to be with a celebrity, or I got to kind of learn a high level entrepreneur. But I wanted to do that as a master of my craft. But the second part of why, because that doesn't have to be in the big leagues, but part of the reason why that had to be in the big leagues is because for my own soul, I needed to get to the big leagues somehow so I could prove to myself that I could get beyond the mysticalness of materialism in the world, because that crushed me when I was in my young mid-20s. And so, I was running a successful business. Schmaltz, you were part of it. Obviously you kind of saw what we were doing. I was solely only working with pro athletes 8 years ago or whatever it was. And so then the Giants saw that, and they came calling, and they wanted to establish a role for me, which was super unique, that we created the human performance role, which I don't think existed in the industry. I don't even know if it does now. And so I kind of had a best of both worlds. I got to go in being myself, which was incredible. And I got to teach and coach the way I wanted to, which was incredible. But the second part that I could not say no to that. And I ended up I sold my company off to leave my company and do this full time. And the reason why I did that was because of the story I told you years earlier when I was at that spring training, because I knew that I needed to go see it for what it was through the lens that I currently have. And I needed to essentially, like, as weird as it may sound, I needed to like forgive the former me and realize that like I could do work at the highest level and not be amazed or by the glitter. I could be able to master my craft at a really high level. And that was it. That was my own personal journey. And I think just because I've had some success professionally, that's obviously why I got a major league job. But yeah, spiritually, I needed to do that no matter what. I needed to go there to prove to myself that I could hang with myself in that position.
Is it what? And obviously, everyone's different. Like when you're training them in on this stuff, do you have to approach each guy differently? Because some things work for another guy, some things don't.
Yeah.
Like how much different is that? Like some of this breathing stuff, does it work for everyone? Does it not work for a certain guy?
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
off. No. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that goes back to what I said earlier. You learn people where they're at. And I think the one thing, so now if we move beyond that side, we just talk nuts and bolts of teaching and how to connect with people in professional baseball, professional sports in general. You have to become very realistic of the audience that you're with. If you're with a 23-year-old who hasn't made $150 million, well, guess what? They're a different person. And the interesting thing about a clubhouse is that you're with someone who could be 38 years old and you're with someone who could be 22 years old. That doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned in other avenues. So there's why I use that range is there's a true generational gap of people. So if you work with a 38-year-old right now or a 39-year-old, that person is probably not as in tune. If they're in sports, I find outside of sports, the 38-year-old is very in tune with spirituality now and very into holisticness. The 38-year-old athlete is not as interested in that right now because think of the environment they grew up in. They grew up in an entirely different era. They didn't have social medias that they could advertise themselves to get themselves to a certain place. And so that alone changes the psychology of how you're going to meet somebody. And then if you go to a 23-year-old, well, they're massively different. I've worked with 23-year-olds who were more famous in college than in pro sports, which is ironic, right? And you see people who now come into pro sports making more money. They're making more money in college than they were in pro sports. And so that has been wild, right? But I think that something that has successfully sustained itself throughout all the generations, the diversity, what country they're from, is not telling anybody what to do. I think if you can master the ability to ask people questions, people love telling you their story. And when you start to understand people's stories and where you fit into their hamster wheel, their interpretation of reality, I think that becomes the chameleon effect of being a teacher like myself. So if someone says, I'm out on breathing, well, that's an irrelevant fixed mind. That's a very closed thought, but I don't care to get you in on breathing either. I'd rather be interested on like what made you come to that statement, right?
Okay.
And so I think as you do that and you stay very open-minded and very more question-based than telling-based, I've just not seen that to be unsuccessful, because that's the job of anybody's role as a teacher, is you have to meet all these people where they're at. And you know, I'll share one quick story. There was a guy that I worked with from an island. He lived on an island as a kid with no money really. And he worked himself up to the big leagues. This other guy, I was in the same clubhouse, lived in the Midwest, and he went to college and he did the whole bit, the whole institutionalized American bit. And in the same clubhouse, one of my first years there, this one guy who was from America was jumping in the cold all the time. He wanted to know the science, the literature, the research, and I was just feeding him, right? So he was loving it, coming back for more every day. Couldn't get this guy enough info, and he loved it. The other guy would avoid me at all costs, and he never wanted to touch a cold tub or do any breath work ever, right? I couldn't understand it, and it was making me really frustrated. So I kept forcing onto him to try to tell him the benefits, the research, because I'm having so much success over here. Why am I not having success over here? And a year later, this guy gets traded, or he got moved on to another team. And one of the coaches, I didn't speak Spanish, one of the coaches who knew this guy really well, I just like asked him, like, what happened last year? Like, where was I with that guy? Where did I miss? And he told me a story that when he was a little kid, and I never knew this, when he was a little kid, they didn't have much electricity or power in the home. And so they had one ice box that they would put all their food in to freeze. And if you opened it and left it open and you ruined the food, that would hurt the family drastically, right? So his mom had said, if you put your hand into that ice box, your hands will freeze off and they'll fall off and you'll never be able to throw a baseball. And so as a kid, he avoided cold at all cost. And as a 25-year-old, he avoided cold at all cost. And I tell that story because that taught me a valuable lesson of meeting people where they're at, because I was so out of touch with that all I did was try to overcompensate by feeding him more information rather than just learning about his life. And it was too late at that point. Now it taught me a beautiful lesson. I feel like I got better for other people. But think about that. You know, we all come to an experience with our own experience. And I think you have to learn whose experience they're in
For sure.
to be able to meet them.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah,
That's good.
That is good. Harv, my last one for you. We could do this all day, and we'll have to have you back on. But my last one for you is, I've always seen you quote this. The desert is for the soul. So why is that?
Why is the desert for the soul? The whole line of that is the mountains for the mind, the oceans for the body,
and the deserts for the soul.
Yeah, I mean, well, if we just think about it, when you're in Montana, have you guys all been to Montana and stared at those mountains? I mean, dude, you will write a book or make a movie when you're staring at those things. And we've all seen the beaches of Malibu or Newport or any of those things, and people are energized and they're flowing and they're chilling. I was just with a guy the other day who's a surfer in San Diego. This guy couldn't be more of a surfer from San Diego. Like the amount of times I'm like, let's get the thought out, you know? And
like, are you that stone fella?
Yeah,
what's going on?
Yeah, but like, think about how chilled the body is when you're in the ocean and the salt water. And people go out. I've never understood this. People go out and surf, and they don't even catch a wave, and they say it was the best day of surfing all time because they're just floating in the salt water. And so in a lot of ways, that's for the body, right? And the body just neutralizes itself. So the desert is dry. It's dead in a lot of ways. And so you're not going to get this mind-body drive. You're going to get this soulful pursuit. I mean, if you think about it, we go out to the desert to dry out. And so when you are drying out, Schmaltz, you just said a while back, when you fasted and you dried yourself out, at the end, is it the 5 bullet points that you saw on Google that became the cool part of the day 3, or was it the spiritual journey that you met yourself at that became the part?
it was insane. And I even think the reflection a couple days afterwards
Yeah.
was the most mind-changing or mind-blowing thing. And Ozzo actually completed one
Nice.
about a week after me.
Beautiful.
And I just think you just have such a different outlook on not only just fuel you're putting in your body, but what it actually means to eat. And also just knowing you're going to be okay if you don't eat that shitty plane food, or at Hudson News in the airport. I don't have to get that granola bar with all those seed oils. Like, I don't know. It was the reflection part of it almost was the most beautiful thing of the whole fast, about 1 to 2 days later, to really process what your body just went through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. That's the same thing that hit me. And so if you go for a walk in the dead of the desert, to me, that's always been a lot more intense than being encapsulated in the Swiss mountains or a beautiful beach. It's a little bit scarier. It's a little bit drier. It's a little bit lonelier. And so when you're in the depths of a desert, you're in Joshua Tree. I guess what? You're getting into the soul, brother. You're not, you know.
You are.
This thing's going to go a lot bigger than painting a picture or surfing on the surfboard. It's going to go deeper. And so, I mean, that's not my quote. That's an ancient proverb, but that would be my understanding of it. I think that it's a very soulful. I mean, there's a reason why Sedona is one of the vortexes of the world. That's a swirling vortice of energy. And I think when people go up there, I mean, there's a different, unique spiritual energy in people that live in that part of the country, in the world, really. And that all comes from the desert. Look at the Egyptian pyramids and the energy that came out of that. I mean, that's soulful. That's soulful stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like you said, there's something spooky about the desert, going out there to Joshua Tree. Like it kind of just reminds me of that song by America, the horse with no name. You're just kind of going out there, like, you know, it's a little wild out here. So, Harv, lastly, I got to get running, but I want you to plug your books and you know, just give the people where they can get those. I obviously have Without Words, and then the other one is Breathe, Exhale, Focus. So plug those, where to get them.
Yeah, I got Breathe, Focus, Excel. Shout out Gabe Kapler, the man. He's the guy who brought me into the Giants. He wrote the forward of that. And then I think he's a GM or assistant GM with the Marlins now. And then I got Without Words, which was published by John Kohler Books. I think they're out of Virginia Beach or somewhere out east out there. But yeah, I wrote those last books. Breathe, Focus, Excel came out in 23. Without Words came out 2024. So in December, right before Christmas. Breathe, Focus, Excel, you're going to get all your classic, you know, your breathwork stuff that we've been talking about, saunas. I talk about smoke saunas, infrared, wood burning, electric in there. Talk about cold exposure. I talk about grounding, and I back a lot of that. That was published by Human Kinetics, so that's an educational book. You can actually get credited if you're a practitioner in the health work field. You can actually get credited with doing that book. So that's going to be largely research driven, and it's going to be focused on a lot of the practices that I do and did with the Giants and Swish, what we did back in the day. Without Words has been a growth phase for my own perspective in the last couple of years. You said earlier, which I really appreciated, egotistically, the philosopher comment. I have taken a liking to philosophy. I think a lot of that is from being in San Francisco over the last couple of years. Alan Watts, shout out, who's deceased, but he's was my favorite philosopher. He lived on a houseboat out in South Toledo and had a little like cabin in the Muirwoods area and up in Northern California. And I studied that religiously over the last couple of years. I fell in love with philosophy. And I think I haven't said this publicly on a podcast because it just came to me on a walk the other day, but I do think that the change of the 21st century and where we're at right now, I do think that the physical exploration of mental and physicality has ended because we've met the information era. So there's no more things to explore. And so I think that the consciousness, the evolution of our species is going to have to go inward. And that's why I titled it Without Words, because I think that our generation specifically are going to be largely a part of this philosophical era where we actually go back to where we were thousands of years ago. And we have to create space for thinking in an industrialized world that is incredibly AI driven to maintain consciousness. So a lot of that book talks about the world, how it materialized, religions, politics, hierarchies, et cetera, the structures that we live in and exist in, and how to learn yourself. And that's why I titled it the way I titled it, Without Words. I think it'll be a non-speaking state and that's what you feel when you're in the desert. You can't find your way out. You're just scared as hell, and you got to dive into the soul and figure it out. So that's what I think is happening, and I wrote a book about it.
Oh, I love it.
Love it.
I've dove into it a little bit, so I got to finish it up here. But Harv, we could do this all day, man. You're a beautiful soul. You're a great chin and a great man. We appreciate you coming on Live in 5, and we'll have to do it again. Namaste, I guess they say.
Namaste. I'm not going to finish after that. Beautiful stuff. Love you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Harv.
Thanks, Harvey.
See you guys.